As we find the headline on the terminal, GOP hardliners stall military funding, raising shutdown risk. And we add the voice now of Michael McCaul, the congressman from Texas who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you with us on Bloomberg. Thanks for coming back. And now that we're getting back into the swing of things here in Washington, indeed, we'd like to ask you about a few issues. But with regard to this latest development here, did that make a government shutdown more likely?
Well, as I understand it, the rule has been postponed. I think they're working out details with the defense appropriations bill. So I would not try to read too much into that. I'm still hopeful that we will have, a rule vote this evening and move forward with the defense appropriations bill, possibly as early as tomorrow. So I don't see that shutdown as imminent as maybe you're indicating. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of shutdowns. I've never seen a shutdown work very well, especially for my party. Republicans always tend to lose when the government's shut down. So I think the American people want us to govern, and they want us to get things done. I think the speaker is trying to do that. And it's, as you noted, very difficult under the circumstances. But, he's always been underestimated every time, and he seems to be able to pull, a rabbit out of a hat, in prior legislation that we've had. So I still remain optimistic.
Congressman, what we're talking about here is that hardline House Republicans didn't even vote to allow defense spending to be debated. This is in the House. In the Senate, we still have Senator Tommy Tuberville holding up more than 300 military nominations. What do you say to American people who look at both the House and the Senate and say the Republican Party is potentially hurting the U.S. preparedness, military preparedness, and it can cause national security concerns?
I share those concerns, and I voice those on CNN, State of the Union on Sunday. But I think it's important to put it into context. The Biden administration, for the first time, used taxpayer dollars to fund this abortions within the military. That's never been done on the National Defense Authorization. In fact, we cured that in the House with our NDAA bill that will be conferenced with the Senate. So my whole point was that I don't think one senator blocking all these nominations is really the more productive route. I think the best route is to deal with this in the conference committee that we will have House and Senate to ensure that taxpayer dollars not being used for abortions in the military. I think holding up these nominations, I've talked to a lot of, brass at the Pentagon, and what I just worry about is that it will impact our national security. There's a debate about that, but I don't see how you can have all these openings unfilled without having some impact on the ability of the military to be ready.
We were actually joined around this time yesterday by Senator Tommy Tuberville himself. He made the case to us that this does not impact readiness, that the rank and file will be just fine, and we have too many generals anyway. You've called this paralyzing to the military, Congressman. What message does it send to China?
Well, if we don't have top key positions in the Pentagon filled, I think it's a sign of weakness. I think it projects weakness, and that's always very dangerous. It invites aggression. I know that Schumer does have the ability to put these nominees forward, and I would hope they can come to a consensus over there. But just holding up these nominations ad infinitum, I think is dangerous. It's well-intentioned. I think he and I both agree, that being Senator Tuberville and I both agree, that taxpayer dollars should not be used for abortions in the military. We fixed that in the House. We're going to conference with the Senate, and I feel very confident that that will be not be a part of the final package. But it's all about the method and how you want to achieve the same goal. And I think holding up these nominees in key positions at the Pentagon does not send a very good message.
When you look at China, we have to ask you what you make of Huawei coming out with this phone that looks like they use technology, the exact technology that there are export controls on China and Chinese companies, CSMIC and also Huawei, both on the entities list, to make sure that China actually doesn't have these capabilities, yet a phone arrives. Do you think the export controls that are on China right now are working?
They're not being enforced. SMIC has American component parts. This 7-nanometer chip is a very advanced chip, and it's now in Huawei's 5G smartphone. This is very disturbing and a major violation of our export control laws. I sent a letter today to Secretary Raimondo, and I have jurisdiction over BIS, which is a Bureau of Industry and Security in charge of export control, because this was not enforced. And now they've got this very advanced technology, 7 nanometer chip. When you look at the hypersonic program, that was built on the backbone of American technology. When it comes to the 7 nanometer chip, and you look at things like AI and the future of warfare, which will involve this kind of semiconductor chip, that is what is most disturbing to me, is that now China, they're very good. They don't really invent things. They're very good at stealing our technology. And this is another good example. And the timing, Annmarie, this was announced the day that Secretary Raimondo left Beijing, with a real slap in the face that, hey, now we got your technology. We got your most advanced semiconductor chip. We got to stop doing this. We got to stop selling to China our most advanced technology that they then that will turn and use against us if, God forbid, we have a conflict in the Pacific.
Well, so then, Congressman, is your committee working up sanctions on SMIC, or should we be talking about a total severing, a total cutoff of our technological relationship with China at this point?
We can't cut all trade, but I would argue that with respect to certain sectors, like the advanced semiconductor chips, like AI, like quantum computing, this is something I've talked to the Commerce Department about, making it more rather than company specific, because China will change the name of the companies. But if you make it sector specific, to me, that's a better way to handle this. That way, all exports regarding AI cannot be exported to China. All exports regarding quantum and advanced semiconductor chips. And that way you deal with it in a very, I think, a broader blanket that I think would apply. And we're going to have commerce with China. They're a big market for the United States, and we buy a lot from them. But when it comes to national security supply chain, like semiconductors, like critical minerals, rare earth minerals, and medical, we need to start pulling that supply chain out. The reason I introduced the Chips for America Act and got it passed was Secretary Pompeo came to me and said, we got to pull supply chain out of Taiwan because TSMC controls 90% of the advanced semiconductor manufacturing for the world. So imagine a scenario where China invades Taiwan with a blockade and cutting the sea cable. Then they either own or break 90% of the world's advanced semiconductor chip manufacturing.
When you look at what happened this week, we saw Kim Jong-un make his way to Russia to meet with President Putin. The individual who could probably put the pressure on both those two leaders, those dictators, would be Xi Jinping. Do you think it's wise the administration still seeks a meeting with Xi Jinping to try to make sure at least they're putting pressure on Beijing to then put more of a pressure on both its neighbors in Russia and in North Korea?
Look, I think it's always good to have meetings and have conversations, but you don't concede certain things. I think, we saw like certain export controls were pulled back prior to these meetings. You don't make concessions before just to have a meeting in and of itself. You have to negotiate out of strength and leverage, not out of weakness. And that's my concern about, the meetings that took place. I don't think China is going to ever talk Kim Jong-un down because, Chairman Xi is a direct ally of Putin. I mean, they made this unholy alliance at the Beijing Olympics just weeks before the invasion into Ukraine. And the idea that they're not joined at the hip is absolutely false. I mean, this is an alliance of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. North Korea is going to start putting their stuff in. Iran's already putting their drones into Ukraine. We're even seeing, mercenaries from Cuba, going into Russia and into the Ukraine fight. So this is really playing out very dramatically between these dictators and the rest of the free world. And that's really what's at stake right now.
These are dangerous times, and we're glad to have you with us, Mr. Chairman. Michael McCaul.
Thanks, Joe. Congressman
from Texas who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Don't be a stranger. We'd like to stay in touch with you on these issues.